Welcome to Networking Star. I am your host, Jeffrey Boyle, and here on Networking Star, I have some of the most innovative entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and people that just frankly help us be and do more in life and inspire us to accomplish more. Today, I have a very special guest. Today, I'm joined by a speaker, executive chairman of Health USANA Health Sciences. He's a husband. He's a father. Kevin Guest really is, I guess I would call you a Renaissance man. He's been with USANA since the very beginning for almost 30 years. They have operations in 24 countries. They have almost 500,000 active customers. And if you've been around direct sales, you know that is an astronomical number of customers. That is just so exciting to hear that. They almost do $1 billion a year in sales. He's also the chairman of the Direct Selling Education Foundation. He has a book called All the Right Reasons, which is filled with questions and answers and just anecdotes from his life. And it's a very good read. And this is what's also very interesting. He's an active musician that has played at the Grand Ole Opry multiple times. And his band, the Free Radicals, has some different videos that have over 1 million views on YouTube. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me here on Networking Star.
Well, thanks, Jeffrey. I appreciate the invitation.
I enjoyed the book, and of course, we met over LinkedIn, and I've followed USANA for years. As I explained, I think I was a sophomore in college when it launched, and you've been there from the very beginning. I'll up till you became CEO, chairman, and now executive chairman. How has that been to be from the very beginning when you were a small group individually handing out checks to today you have millions of people, customers, distributors all across the world?
Well, I wish I could say I was that smart. I'm probably just that persistent. And when I look back and think about, okay, how did I get from where I was back when USANA started 30 years ago? My only desire was to be self-employed, to run my own company, and to be in the creative world in music and in television and video production. That was my focus and my dream and aspiration. And USANA came along and asked me if I would help them tell the story and create their media materials and produce their events. And things just snowballed from there. And so to answer your question, it's kind of surreal to have experienced all of these years of continued success as we spread this vision of creating the healthiest family on earth around the world.
Well, in your book, you talk about a lot of these different things. You talk very openly about your failures. You talk about your successes. You talk a lot about the mentors that you've had in your life. And in the book, it's obvious that your father had a tremendous impact on you, and even your time working the sawmills in Montana. Talk a little bit about that mentorship of your father and how that really helped give you that work ethic to be a sawmill operator all the way up to being a top executive at one of the industry's biggest companies.
Yeah, as I think about my dad, he grew up, he was born during the Great Depression era. As a young boy, I think he was 11 or 12 years old, was working almost full time and giving all the money to his parents so that they could buy groceries. And then he ended up having to serve in World War II, just 18 years old, out of high school, went directly into World War II and spent 3 years in the South Pacific area during World War II, and then was married. And literally all he had when he got married was, he said, his duffel bag from the war and a shotgun. And that's what he took with him up to Montana, which is where I grew up and where we're from. And so as I think about my dad, one of the greatest things that I saw all throughout the years was that he was just a hard worker, but he was also willing to give of his time and energy to others, to help others. If someone was building a home, if someone was in need, my dad would throw me in the car, maybe with my brothers if they were around, and we would go help wherever help was needed at the end of what I know was a long day for him. He started as a bookkeeper at a sawmill in Montana, and worked for the same entrepreneur who owned the sawmill in Montana for many years. The owner passed away, and when he passed away, he gave my dad a small piece of the company. And my dad ended up buying with a partner. I remember them mortgaging our house and everything we had so that they could qualify for the loan to buy the mill. And consequently, following that, it burnt down twice on them.
Wow.
But what I learned through all of these experiences with my dad is the value of relationships. When the mill burnt down, I remember the bank coming and my dad talking about the bank wanting to help them out because he had a good relationship with them. They
Right.
honored him. They trusted him. His employees, he kept them employed by selling existing inventory while they were rebuilding the mill and things
Wow.
like that. And he had employees that were willing to work for free just to get the mill back up and going. And it was all because of the relationships that he, throughout all the years, developed. And that was something that I grew up witnessing, and something that I really mark as one of the reasons why I've seen what success I've seen is because it depends mostly on relationships and how you interact with people.
One of the summers in between, I think my junior and sophomore year of college, I worked at a sawmill. It is brutal work, and it's the kind of thing that until you do it, just even stacking the lumber and just it is a crazy amount of work. And I can see throughout your book really how that set the foundations with your father's example. You talked about uh, in the book that there was, I think, 3 years is what you said, that your family didn't have a car, but you had a piano. That to me was a fun story, and being in the Grand Old Opry now and just having a career in music and also in business, that had to have had an impact to have a piano, where your father made the sacrifice of, I guess, riding a bike to get groceries and go to work.
Yeah, and that was long before I was born when that happened. It was when they were first married. My parents saw the importance of music in the home and valued that above anything else, as they wanted church hymns and music in our home. And so they did buy a piano before they bought a car. And my dad used to ride my mom to the store on his bike. And in my book, I call this the piano principle. And really
Yeah.
the punchline of the whole story is if you want something bad enough, you'll sacrifice what it takes to get it. And my parents over and over exemplified that they were willing to sacrifice what they saw was important for their family, especially. And they made sure that those needs were met before they met other needs that were probably wants versus have to have.
In your book, you start the book off with questions, and then you have questions all throughout the different chapters that you have on there. And you talk about the importance of, you'll ask a question and you'll answer it, but you ask, for example, are you willing to give up the future for momentary pleasure? Are you willing to give up the future for relationships? And talk a little bit about just you really explain the importance of listening. And so as I went through that, it became very apparent that you've made a career in telling other people's stories. You've made a career, of course, in being a better listener than just always talking. Explain a little bit about that, how that's helped you with your career and also with the success of USANA.
So I found myself and I find others listening to respond versus listening to understand.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference. And many times we sit and we think about, okay, what are we going to say next? And that's the
Hmm.
kind of conversation we have. But if we truly listen to understand, that's really being empathetic and showing empathy. And there's a great article published by the Harvard Business Review about social intelligence. And
Right.
one of the key factors of social intelligence is being able to have empathy. And I think listening to understand versus listening to respond is part of showing empathy to the person you're interacting with. Secondly, you'll understand where they're coming from and you'll be able to meet people where they are at, not where you are at or where you want them to be. And so listening is a very, very important part of being a dad, being a husband, being a grandpa, being a co-worker, being a friend. If you can develop how to be a good listener, being truly empathetic, I think it will change your relationships in all areas of your life.
Yeah, no question. You talk about that as a father, a grandfather, and a business owner, just how important it is to listen. A lot of people may hear, but they're not listening as they go through that, and that's I like how you address that. I also like as I was going through that, you reached a point in your career where your music business was taking off, and your, of course, USANA was really starting to see big differences. And for anybody who is not familiar with direct sales, for a company to be 30 years old, to have a 500,000 clients is a huge deal. I mean, it's a huge deal in regular business, but within the direct selling business, you have these half lives of businesses just continuing to compress, whereas you guys continue to expand even after 30 years. Explain some of the difficulty you had. You couldn't have seen just the tremendous worldwide success when you were trying to make that choice between a music career that was when you had your mullet, I guess, and when you moved on to this, which is really a business empire, $1 billion business in 24 countries with 500,000 clients and hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs all across the globe. How was that to make that choice at that time?
Well, to be honest with you, and again, I said a little earlier, but it appears that I was that smart. But it really comes down to, in answering your question real directly, it comes down to my core values.
Yeah.
And for me, my number one value is my relationship with God.
Hmm.
Second is my family, and then third is my business relationships. And when it came down to a music career, I was on the road a lot, and I literally was producing and working on USANA videos and products in my hotel room during the day, wherever I might be in the country, and playing at night. Literally doing that day after day after day. And one day I came home and I had three children at the time. I have four, and I ended up having four, but three at the time. And my daughter grabbed a hold of my leg and she said, "Dad, can't you stay home?" And she was pleading with me to be around and be present. And I realized at that moment that my responsibility as a father and a husband superseded my desire to be on the road playing music and being away from my family. And so that was really the genesis of my decision to really knuckle down and work on my production company. And USANA came in my path, which I believe is a blessing. And things developed from there. But the decision really was not my foresight from a business opportunity perspective, but it was more a choice based upon the values that I had already chosen that I was going to follow. And so when the decision came, there really wasn't a decision because I had already made it. And first and foremost, uh, behind God, it was my family, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice that for anything.
You talked a lot about that too, and God is a big part of your life, not just in the service to your church, but also as you do the service. You talked about a lot of the missions that you've gone out with USANA and Dr. Myron Wentz, the founder of USANA. As you would go out, you would see some opportunities to serve with money and with prosperity. Of course, there comes this wonderful opportunity to do some of the things that you have done. What have been some of your favorite things that you've been able to do, if you don't mind sharing? Because sometimes people are a little bit reluctant to share some of that. What are some of those things that you've been able to do with the prosperity of USANA as you go out into some of these, I guess, less affluent countries?
Well, one thing is that all the proceeds for my book, 100% are going to our foundation to feed hungry children. And I set out the goal to sell enough books to raise 1 million meals to be
Wow.
donated to children, and we're just over 2 million right now. And so that's been something that's been very worthwhile. The book's in 5 languages. And so to be able to provide meals through the stories of my life has been very gratifying. One of my favorite quotes is by Winston Churchill. And he says, we make a living out of what we get, but we make a
Mm-hmm.
life out of what we give. And so much of our lives are spent trying to get, trying to earn, trying to acquire. But if we can focus more on giving, that's where true life and happiness happens. I remember being in Africa, delivering meals to families where you have 12 people in a one-room hut that are burning literally furniture for firewood. Something we're doing right now at USANA that is extremely successful are garden towers, where we have a system where we can set them up with a garden in a gunny sack, basically, anywhere in the world, especially in Africa where the soil doesn't grow vegetables very well. And now they're having vegetables. It's creating an industry for them. People now have work. They're selling the vegetables. Not only are they feeding their family, we've got tens of thousands of those all over the world. We're doing partnerships with the country of the government of the Philippines on several acres of land. We'll have a whole community that's being fed in large part off these garden towers that are all coming from donations from people like me and our associates and others around the world that just want to help.
Well, you mentioned Mother Teresa in the writings, and you talked about how she died basically penniless. A lot of times, when you're an entrepreneur, you can get very focused on the money, and then when the money comes in, as I said, you do have a tremendous responsibility. What enabled Mother Teresa to have such a wide reach is not only her goodness, but the fact that she had a lot of corporate sponsorship that helped her go out and use that just tremendous personality that she has, that she had. Can you talk a little bit about that, about just your ability to magnify the good that you do in the world through capitalistic ventures, that really what you guys have been able to accomplish?
Yeah, I was speaking to a group of graduate students in Florida at a university. They had me come in and speak to their masters, their continuing education group, and the question came up: how can you do business in China with so many bad things are happening with the government in China, and how do you reconcile that, and so forth? And so, to answer your question, the first thing that came to mind is my answer to that question was just this last year we've been able to provide funds for over 14 children in China to have heart
Mm.
transplants
Wow.
who otherwise would have died. And we in China are providing millions of meals to people who are in need. And so we can be part of the solution in any area, whether it's in a communist country, where it might be, we can go in and do good because there is certainly a humanitarian need even here in our backyard in Salt Lake City, Utah, wherever we are in the world, there is need. And those who have been given much, I believe, are expected to
Right.
give back much. And I think that's part of being a humanitarian, is being able to give back. But yeah, as I think about where we've gone in and made a difference, um, you know, the Philippines, after they got hit by the hurricane there, water was a problem. So we were able to go in and help provide clean water, and fishing villages where all of their sustenance is based upon fishing. All their boats were destroyed. So we took in groups of people and built boats so that these fishermen could get
Mm.
back in the water and provide for their families, and so things like that. There's never a lack of need. And for your listeners, I would encourage you to find something you have confidence and trust in, and give of yourself. It doesn't have to always be money. Your time is very valuable as well, and there are many ways to give that will help people in need. And there's never a lack of need in the world.
As you're talking about some of those places that you've been able to go, uh, I've had really in the same industry of direct sales. I've had this wonderful opportunity to spend a tremendous amount of time in China and a tremendous amount of time in Russia. And with the recent world events, it breaks my heart because the people of those countries are exactly like us. They are just like us. They want to be proud of their country, but they also want to be, they want to be a good person. And I think until you've been over there, and I remember speaking to my Russian friend, his name was Vladimir, and we had to, through a translator, but we became really dear friends. And I really miss him. I really miss the ability to interact because so much of the communication platforms have been shut down, they've been shut out. And it really breaks my heart to see the politicians vilify the people of Russia, vilify the people of these different places. And I'm sure you found that same thing. And I think that one of the beautiful things about direct sales is that you really do have the opportunity to go out, and it's a foundation. The industry is a foundation of self improvement, and the ability to go out in multiple language, talk this language of self improvement, self care, health. That had to have been a really powerful way over the last 30 years for you to make a living and meet all these tremendous people across the world.
Yeah, the message that we take out is health, right? And you talk about when we talk about 500,000 customers, the way we measure those is who's purchased in the last 90 days. But we literally have millions who are utilizing our products. And I really think for me, the satisfaction is watching people consume a product that is very valuable to them, that brings a result that they need, but also in many countries provides them with an opportunity then to have employment.
Yeah.
And it doesn't discriminate whether it's man, woman, whether you have a degree, whether you've gone to school or not. It just, the only discriminator is, are you willing to work?
Hmm.
Because it's not easy. It's hard work. But if you have a product that you have confidence in and that offers a value proposition, then you see success. And that's how we've kept this going for 30 years, really. And as we've seen the economy go up and down and seen a stable business, it's because of the value proposition that we have in our products that our people are out selling. And so it's very gratifying to see people who basically have been impoverished take products, have products give a positive experience. They decide then to start their own business, and then it helps them dig themselves out of the hole that they're in. So not only is their health improved, but then their financial situation also sees improvement. So yeah, it's very gratifying.
My translator always for Russia was Ukrainian, and she was part Ukrainian, part Russian, and just a wonderful, wonderful lady. And I know that she's been displaced. You guys have done a lot of charitable work in not just China, but I also know that you've done some in Ukraine. How has this been disrupted with these government clashes that we're seeing now? And it seems to be almost as if we're returning to some sense of the Cold War, which is heartbreaking. And I see these wonderful Ukrainian friends that I've been able to establish. What are some of the things that you guys are doing in these different parts of the world to try to help even some in almost impossible situations where governments put us?
So one area where we have been active in the Ukraine, and I've been there and
Hmm.
witnessed this firsthand. They had a huge issue with parents leaving children
Oh, wow.
because they couldn't afford to have them, and or other circumstances. Mostly it was financially motivated, but their orphanages were full to bulging and very
Mm.
under resourced. And same in Romania. And so when I was in Ukraine, we were going to various orphanages, and we were doing something where we were providing simply beds,
Mm.
mattresses for these orphanages, because these kids were sleeping on horrible, rotten, had been urinated on, deployable uh, bedding that you might not think about, but is
Mm.
very, very necessary for these kids. And so we provided several orphanages with beds. Um, and we've also worked with food and various things like that. But our focus in the Ukraine has been the orphanages.
Yeah, it is impressive. An organization, like I said, I remember when USANA launched. I remember the critique that you guys received for the binary. And if you are not in that, if you've never been in network marketing, you may not know what that means. But it was a very, at the time, an extraordinarily innovative compensation plan that has really become, so many different people have attempted to copy it in one way or the other, and you guys really have been a trendsetter in so many years, and now the stability of what you've created has been impressive, especially as a public company. The scrutiny is even greater as a public company because of what you've done. If you don't mind me pivoting just a little bit, you talked a little bit about the Grand Ole Opry, and the first time that you played in the Grand Ole Opry, you were so nervous that you described yourself as numb. Whereas the second time, and now as you're doing it again, explains us a little bit difference and put that into perspective. That brand new network marketer, that brand new entrepreneur of this growth phase that you go through to go from numb and possibly incompetent to really going where you're doing it out of love, and you start to see just tremendous results from your work.
Well, I appreciate the question because I was hopeful we would get to this topic, and hopefully I'm answering your question directly. But one of the things that I've struggled with over the years is anxiety,
Yeah.
and how do I manage that? And and so what happened to the Grand Ole Opry? When you go to the Grand Ole Opry, there's usually 4 or 5 acts that perform that night. It's a live broadcast, and you stand backstage, and while one group is performing, you literally have a commercial break to be
Mm.
on stage. When they come back from the commercial break, you're playing music, right? And so I'm standing backstage while the other act is out performing, and I start having a panic attack.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, I feel my heart racing, my mouth goes dry. I'm not thinking. I'm trying, okay, what are the chords to the song? What am I going to go out and play? What am I going to do? And I was literally in that mindset minutes before I was ready to go on national television. Well, luckily, I have been to therapy. I continue to go to therapy. I think everybody should get a good therapist to help them through the ups and downs of life. But I had learned some tools how to manage a panic attack, which was breathing. So I went into my breathing exercise, went into my focus on being present, not going down the rabbit hole of what if and worst case scenario. And by the time it was time to go out on stage, I had settled myself down enough that I was able to go out and perform and do a good job. So the second time I went back, I'd had this experience. I had prepared myself for what I was possibly going to experience again, but I set my goal on being present and being in the moment. And when I went in, I went and looked at the other dressing rooms, and I went and ate some of the treats that they had, and I met some of the other artists, and we happened to be performing that night with Keith Urban and with Brooks and Dunn.
Wow.
And I stood backstage, and I had Keith Urban on one side and Kix Brooks on another side, and I was just in the moment, and I had a fantastic experience. And so for me, the what I learned through this, looking back, is being in the moment, but one, recognizing when you're having a challenge, work through that challenge, but then go back again. The sad thing would have been had I not gone back because I had the bad experience. And so when a salesperson, the number one thing that is between a successful salesperson, whether it's in network marketing or any kind of sales, and an unsuccessful, is the successful one has been told no more times
Right.
than the unsuccessful, meaning you're in the business of people telling you no and rejection. And so how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to respond? How are you going to have a better experience the next time you're told no? All of those kinds of things. So that's what's been important to me. And I tell this story to our distributors around the world, and they're like, "What? The CEO of our company who stands in front of thousands of people all the time had a panic attack?" Well, yeah, I'm human, right? And I did, and I've had them in other circumstances, but I have a toolbox that I've learned that I go to that help get me through those situations and help me get better and better and better.
Well, and you've received compliments a lot. You can see different compliments on the different things that you post, where people are surprised by that. About that anxiety that you felt. I've got four boys and one daughter, and my daughter is 21, and she just returned from serving in uh, a church mission in Argentina. I was surprised when she told me that she had anxiety. She's always been so articulate. She's always been, of course, she's my only daughter, so she happens to have a special kind of love that I have for her. But I was really surprised that she too met with a therapist, and the therapist gave her tools. And I kind of thought, oh my goodness, I failed as a father. I didn't recognize that. I just saw this amazingly articulate, beautiful young lady that it surprised me. Do you think that we do, especially within uh, this upcoming generation, is more in touch the fact that they do have anxiety? My approach was always just rub some dirt on it and go out and try to fix it. But explain a little bit. You talked about the breathing techniques and even pushing past that. When you do right now with so many people, and you really are influencing hundreds of thousands of people with USANA, what do you tell that brand new person, that brand new entrepreneur, when you feel the anxiety, what they should do?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's important to set proper expectations. And the first thing I talk to people about is what I said earlier. It's hard. And
Mm,
rejection is a big part of this. And the reason why people succeed is they face these obstacles and they stand up to them and they come back and they are persistent but also consistent. And consistency is such an important part for a young
yeah.
entrepreneur or anybody starting, is to understand what the fundamentals are and then continue those fundamentals. I read a book that was by Steve Young, and in the book he talked about having won the Super Bowl, and he came back to pack up his locker the day after the Super Bowl, and he looked at the practice field, and Jerry Rice was in the practice field running reps the day
Mm,
after having just won the Super Bowl. And you know, uh, there's a great message in that Jerry Rice was out practicing the fundamentals, even though he's the best to ever play the sport in that position. And people also get away from the fundamentals and try and go after the magic silver bullet and the shiny this and that to get things done. It really comes down to the frequency of relevant communications and then providing that in a way that people want to receive it. But understanding that there will be rejection, and rejection is part of it, and it's not a personal issue. It's just part of what's going on and how we succeed. And that's really life, right?
right.
We learn much more from the hard times and the troubles than we do from the easier times. And it's very much the same for an entrepreneur starting up a business.
Well, and so the last question I have for you is that as an entrepreneur starting a business, it doesn't matter if it's in the industry that you've had so much experience with, or whether it's just any other venture, a musician, because you also have had startups for your media company. You've had startups with your band. You were a part of a startup that's now doing $1 billion a year, almost $1 billion a year. What do you tell that brand? What's that one secret that you would give that brand new entrepreneur? Maybe it's that 21-year-old that's saying, I can do this. What do you tell that person to launch successfully?
Well, I just speaking from my own experience, I think the number one thing that most entrepreneurs kind of skip past because it's not any fun and sometimes it's not easy, but you have to know your numbers. Meaning, uh, how many people do you talk to before you get a yes?
Mm,
And then when you get a yes, what is the value of that yes? And then how many times do you have to get a yes to pay your monthly bills? And so there is an equation that equals success. And most people just jump in all excited. They just go like crazy and they're trying and trying, but yet they don't know how they're going to win in a very, very real sense. And so for me, when I was running my own business, my media business, I knew how many people every day I had to talk to based on my closure ratio that I had figured out by keeping track of it, which was 48 people a day that I had to talk to because I knew the value of every sell that came back because I knew what my overhead was. And so every day I would start the day knowing very simply what I needed to accomplish that day to reach my goal at the end of the month. And if I didn't do that, then unless I was very lucky, which I hate to have luck playing to things, I'd be upside down and you'd go, wow, I worked hard, I did this, I did that, what happened? So for me, the and I don't know if there's any secret, but what I tell people is know your numbers. Keep track of who you're talking to. How many say yes? Why and how they say yes? What is your average order size? What are your goals for your next step? Then if your goal is this, then you know how many people you need to talk to. It's simply a statistical numbers issue more than it is luck and ability. And like I said before, the most successful people have been told no more than people who haven't. And I just that's my message generally is, again, you have to be persistent, but you also have to be consistent in what you're doing, and that will help keep discouragement at bay as well, because you can see that you're accomplishing something very real.
Well, I think that the more successful people I interview, the more successful people I spend time with, the more you see that the secrets really aren't secrets. The secrets are very consistent. You take the actions, you understand you start to see the patterns in your actions, and those actions really do determine your results. And it doesn't matter what field of a person's in, it really is the same. Is if you're not willing to put in the work, you're not going to get the results. Kevin, I know people can find you at USANA.com. They can find information about you on LinkedIn, but I know that you're very proud of your group, the Free Radicals. Will you please tell everybody how to find information about this? Really, it's, I think, a passion in your life.
It is a passion. We have a YouTube channel. It's called Free Radicals Band on YouTube. So if you search Free Radicals Band, you'll find us. Also, if you go to my webpage, kevinguest.com, you'll see lots of music there, but you also see the book and other things. So either way, it's a great way to get in touch, and most importantly, have some fun.
The book is worth a read. I'm excited to go check out the band to see this. A guy that's played with everybody, with Gene Simmons from Kiss to Keith Urban. That's a guy that you got to see. So I'll check that out. Thank you so much for being a part of Networking Star.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.